The WildLife. Stories of humanity's original skills, told from the perspective of the people who love them.
In those days after the hurricane, the weeks, the months even, having this skill set was invaluable. We were able to be more comfortable in our own situation so that we could be more helpful to our neighbors. It wasn't super stressful for us because we're used to living without modern amenities. And I think it also shed light on how valuable these skills are just in a practical sense for post-storm times or any natural disaster for that matter.
The hardest part for me was to see just man-made destruction. That's a lot of trash. Once it's not a house anymore, it's garbage.
So there was a real winter after the hurricane with all the destruction that came in. And yet we're seeing that natural cycle move from spring into summer. And that there's evidence of bare branches, but life is moving on.
I think it'll be about 3 years to get back to forest conditions as opposed to like woodland where there's openings in the canopy. Then maybe 7-8 years for it to get back to where it was, at least as far as the amount of shade, the amount of forest versus woodland or field. So it's a long haul. We're still in the beginnings of the regrowing, and for people too. There's power back, there's internet back in a lot of places, but it's still not back to normal for people.
You see this progression of nature working its way back to the way it was before the storm, but you also see the progression of people and their daily lives and culture, like just human culture working on getting back to the way it was.
It's really crazy to invest so much time and energy and money and just your whole lives in a place where it might all get knocked down again. And to have that thought in the back of your head that, how am I building this? Where am I planting this tree? How am I planting this garden with regards to the next time there's going to be a hurricane?
Things will return back to a normalcy, but how that landscape will change, how it's like affected in that long term. Like, will there be like new plants that come in, or will it create a lot of, like, has all the leaves that dropped in the wood that's been pushed over, will that create a nutrient burst or
a huge burst? And also it's going to increase the amount of native species in the forests. That area where we planted that almond tree was the most vine-choked area and full of the most tantan and ganip, which are non-native species. They have their place on the landscape, but in certain areas it'll be nothing but those plants. Those areas took the hardest hit, and some of the native trees had the least amount of damage. Like this tree that's right behind us, this ceiba tree. I mean, hardly any branches came off of it. It's a big tree with outreaching branches that you'd think would just break off easily in a storm like that, but they're some of the strongest trees. So it seems like the native trees are just made for those hurricane conditions. Yeah. I never would have imagined there were so many papaya seeds just in the ground, but obviously really cool to see that as an early succession plant. It comes up and only grows for 2 to 5 years, and then it dies back. By that time, I'm sure a lot of native tree species have gotten up above those herbaceous plants, and you get a forest in the long run as opposed to a field or a woodland or a choked thicket.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing about the tropics, is there may be hurricanes that create these setbacks, but everything grows so fast here. So it takes less time for things to grow back than if a hurricane hits in a temperate zone.
It's been an interesting emotional mix for somebody who, does a lot of naturalist studies. sad to see all these trees break down, to see areas that had a certain feeling and composition of trees or plants get totally destroyed in one sense. So you're seeing all this destruction and all these just devastated plants, but then you're also seeing how the area naturally comes back, and a really cool opportunity to watch that. So you got that emotional roller coaster going on every day where you're sad because of all the destruction, but then excited to see what's going to come out next.
Although the landscape was greatly changed by the hurricane, through a combination of hard work and Matt and Carmen's knowledge, we were able to gather enough food for a final meal around the fire. We foraged around camp for a few last additions of some herbs and edibles around the yard. And Eiley and Carmen took care of the harvesting of a couple of their feral flock. Soon we had enough for a feast, and Matt set about starting the fire.
My passion with leading guided survival trips isn't just so that people can learn the physical skills of survival. That's definitely part of it. It's important. It can save people's lives. But there's a whole other part to it.
It's very relaxing once I leave. Once we're off the pavement and we're in the bush and it's like time to start looking for plants and time to start paying attention to where we're at and what we can live from, like the stress just goes away. More than any other class.
It's a much slower pace of life. And if there's anything that people need nowadays, it's just to slow down to the pace of the earth, to our natural pace that we're supposed to be living at.
There's going to be rampant failure, outright failures. I love it. It's so crazy. You're always going to fail. You just realize that. I mean, when a student is working on a shelter and they're getting really tired and it's still not done, and the whiner starts just chirping in their brain even, and they're, be here, it's hot, but you know, whatever their complaint is. There's like a mini failure there because people are excited about having a success and it being this thing that's like what you would read in a storybook. It's not like that, ever. There's always struggles, so those are little failures that happen to students along the way, and it's great to be the teacher there because you're allowing them to break down. You're allowing them to have those little, mental blocks.
When we just throw ourselves out there with so little and we're left to survive on our own, then it forces us into a whole different way of being, a whole different way of thinking, of living that is much closer to what our ancestors lived on a day-to-day basis.
I remember when I was first learning it, and I'm going out and I'm like, this is gonna be sweet. I'm gonna do my shelter thing, and then I'm gonna find some acorns and turn it into bread and catch an animal, and it's gonna be great. And then it's like cold as hell the first night, super uncomfortable, don't sleep at all. Like, there's 5 acorns and they're rotten. The animals that don't care about my traps suck anyway. Like, end of the first day, I'm just like, what the hell am I doing here? It's never gonna be the storybook. And when it is, it's gonna be because you just chipped away through all of those little discomforts and through all those little mini failures, and you're at a point where you just don't care anymore, and you're just doing what needs to be done.
Taking people on these survival trips, a big thing that people experience is just this shift in slowing down. And when we slow down, then we start to realize things about ourselves. We start to have epiphanies about our lives. Where we were confused, suddenly we have clarity.
The dream-like quality of a survival situation, that something really pure inside of you starts to come out when you forget about the whiner and just do what needs to be done. And when you have those moments where you're not thinking about anything necessarily, you're just doing what comes naturally in that pure human wilderness environment.
It forces people to grow their comfort zone. And when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you're just going outside of that comfort zone. And as you go farther out, it causes that comfort zone to grow. And if you have a big comfort zone, then you end up enjoying life a lot more, for one. You end up learning more because when you're comfortable, you can relax more and learn from things that present themselves to you in life.
Everybody goes into it knowing that they're responsible for themselves, because you enter it saying, okay, this is a survival situation. There's going to be an edge experience. It's going to push my comfort levels. You have to know that going in. It's survival. We're not calling it a retreat. We're not calling it a camp out. It's a survival trip. So everybody has a certain amount of their own bullshit that they have to face, because you're in nature. It's just a mirror. If you're really pissed or you're really upset, when you're having those negative emotions and you're in a wilderness setting, it's just your stuff that you have to deal with. The wilderness is not giving you any, false clues as to what's going on. So when you have those epiphany moments, you know that you just broke through. You know that you just went through your own bullshit and came out the other side and were able to look back on it. And so it's a really personal experience. And that to me is why it gives that enlightenment feeling, because you reach something deep within yourself. You enter your survival mind, and that you're in a survival situation, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much of that, discomfort, those failures that you're dealing with, there's something inside you that can function. You can be like, this is going to be an adventure of a lifetime, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that. But personally, I'm more comfortable as a teacher saying, it's going to suck for a lot in there. But it's going to be so amazing in there. And then we're going to come home and eat peanut butter sandwiches like pigs in filthy clothes. Look at ourselves like, what were we just doing? Then we're like, wow, that was totally like a dream right there. What the hell was I back there? Oh man, I was a human being. Whoa, that was cool. That's what it's like to me. That's why I keep doing it, and that's why I can't stop myself.
I see it as important to teach kids these skills because I think everybody should know them, adults, kids. But when they learn it at a young age, it's just a lot easier to learn. It just becomes a part of who they are at an early age. So I see the way we're parenting as giving them a jump start. Eiley, she's 4, and she'll take people on plant walks and teach them a whole bunch of interesting stuff.
It feels really natural to teach my kids these skills. Way easier than teaching them math and reading and the stuff we need to survive in the modern world. because I mean, Eiley amazes me all the time how much she picks up. It's not even teaching because they're around us so much. It's such a natural thing to teach, to raise your children with these skills. It comes out so naturally. You're in need of downtime if you're raising a kid. And usually the downtime that you're in need of is some that's completely quiet and is like free from distractions. What better way than to go on a walk in the woods to pick up some skill and work on it? And because your kids see that all the time as your relaxation, as your outlet, like they pick it up so much faster than if you tried to teach them these skills. It's like really, it really feels like when I'm teaching my kids these skills, it feels like another aspect of these skills, as opposed to teaching when it's somebody I don't know. It feels like I'm still learning more, or I'm still discovering more about what these skills mean when I'm teaching it to my kids. I think we're a really great first step for people who are interested in tropical survival. There's a lot of people worldwide living with these primitive skills as their day-to-day living situation, but to find them can be difficult for people, and it's nice to already have a little bit of knowledge of the plants. I think it's a really amazing thing, especially for somebody who's been doing these skills for a while, to plant yourself somewhere where you don't know any of the plants, where it's a wall of green. Just from that aspect, people who want to push their skills and be in a new environment and not know anything and see where they're at.
We are here on St. Croix with our school, Caribbean Earth Skills, as a place for people who live in the Caribbean and want to learn more about their environment in which they live. We're here for people who want to travel to a different ecosystem and hone their skills in a new place with new materials that they never used. And people who just enjoy traveling to tropical areas all over the world, who might want to learn this particular skill set specific to the tropics so that they can take that wherever they go and use that in their travels.
What we're teaching is all principles. It's all stuff that's applicable to anywhere else you might go in the world. And then people get a sweet vacation out of it.
Thanks for joining us as we explore the places, people, and the skills this show is all about.